Hello and welcome back. Again, I'm Glenn Einschlag, and I'm going to start on a different read, one with which I'm not familiar at all. This is a read done by a student, and I'm unfamiliar with the piece of cane. I'm unfamiliar with where it is in its life. I'm unfamiliar with the profile or shape. I know nothing about this read other than a student made it, and I'm going to go through the questions and see what we can do with it, or if we discern that we can't do anything with it. Now, I want to say a word about how I worked on the previous read. Always, I feel that it's important to go through all of the questions in their entirety before you determine a course of action. Obviously, since I've been doing it for quite a while, I've developed a sort of shorthand with these questions, and I could pretty much discern what direction the read was going in by the third question. However, I felt it was very important to answer all of the questions before I did anything to the read, and there's a very specific reason for that. For example, if I've decided that the low register is not responding very well, if I've determined that, which is the fifth question, I could very well scrape on a reed to make the low register work much better. However, if I would have just answered the next question, which is the reed closing up in the high register, I would have learned that the reed has a very good high register. And by scraping on the reed to improve the low register, I could have sacrificed the reed's strengths in the high register. In other words, sometimes I may feel that if a reed is not responding very well in the low register, depending on what I have to play at that moment or what I have coming up, I might not try to improve that at all and just use that reed for high register solos or high register contexts. That's why I like to go through all of the questions first to determine how a reed can be best used or what areas of the reed's playing characteristics I want to improve upon or save and conserve. Also, I think it's very important for anyone starting out with this method or not starting out with this method to try a reed after every single alteration that you make. Obviously, I altered this reed's wires and I scraped cane off at the same time before trying the reed. This is only because over the years, I've developed an intuition about what is sufficient and what types of things a reed needs more or less of. However, I do encourage you to try the reed and play on it after any alteration that you make so that you can determine which alteration was effective and which ones were not. Okay, so let's go through the 8 questions in their entirety with this student reed. First, is it too open or too closed? I feel that the reed is a little on the too closed side. I was very nervous that if I blew too hard, the reed would lose the note or jump to another octave, and it began to seemingly close up a little bit in the high register, so I'm going to say it's a little too closed. Now, is the reed responding or tapering? I'm going to set up my tuner, and I'm going to play a D and an F sharp very quietly. Okay, so the answer is no. The reed is not responding or tapering. Okay, now, are the E, F, and C sharp dropping? The answer is yes, they are. Okay, is the reed sharp or flat? Instead of my tuner, I'll play my F major scale. actually hovering very close to pitch. Some notes are a little on the flat side, others, very few, are edging above the pitch, but I think that has more to do with the idiosyncrasies of my instrument. Again, I am purposefully not adjusting to this reed. I'm playing as I normally would and noting and gathering the information that the tuner gives me. So I'm going to say that the pitch of this reed is relatively okay. In my mind, it's not the most pressing issue about that reed. This reed, I should say. Now, is the low register responding well? Let's find out. Well, fortunately, I think we can agree that the low register response can be improved upon. Okay, let's see if it's closing up in the high register. I think it wants to close up in the high register. I'm getting the feeling that I can manipulate it to not close up in the high register, but I don't feel like I can really trust it. So I think I'll say, yes, it does slightly want to close up in the high register. Now, I'm going to say that the reed is on the stuffy side. I don't feel like it's vibrating quite enough. Usually I like to describe the stuffiness as if a reed is sort of attacking like something like that. And this reed is sort of skating on that tendency. Does not feel wild. It is not vibrating too much. So let's review. It's slightly on the closed side, not responding at all. The E, F, and C sharp are dropping. It's relatively in tune, and the low register is not responding well, and it wants to close up in the high register, and it's stuffy. Okay, now I think we can agree that this reed is very far from ideal, and we're going to have to make a determination. Now, there are certain, shall we say, conflicting traits about this reed that I'll discuss. First of all, it's not responding or tapering. Usually, when I encounter a reed like that, it means that it needs to be weakened. The reed is a little too heavy somewhere, or it's too light somewhere, making another area seem too heavy. So usually when a reed is not responding or tapering very well, I would like to take some cane off. However, I have to be mindful that the E, F, and C sharp are dropping. Maybe not all three of them, but one or two of them has the tendency to drop. What that means, what that tells me, is the reed is too weak and needs to be strengthened. Now, if I address one of those problems, the other problem will be exacerbated. So there I have to make a decision as to whether I want to do that. So I have to decide whether I can find a use for a reed that won't respond or taper, or if I can find a use for a reed that's too weak, where the E, F, and C sharp in that range is unstable. Sadly, off the top of my head, I can't really think of too many contexts where I would be comfortable with a reed that was exhibiting either one of those characteristics. Now let's talk about two other questions that contradict one another. The reed is closing up in the high register. To me, that displays a weakness in the reed. It is not strong enough to withstand the engagement of my embouchure. Conversely, it is not responding well in the low register. That, to me, tells me that the reed is too strong somewhere, too heavy. Once again, if I address one of those problems, the other will be exacerbated. Normally, a reed will favor one or the other, or rarely be stellar in both the low register and the high register. This reed is problematic in both. So my inclination is to actually discard this reed. If I address one problem, or if I try to correct one problem, another problem will be exacerbated, and I can't think of any context where I can legitimately use this reed. Even practicing on it would frustrate me, because there are too many things that I would want to do musically that this reed just cannot do. Therefore, I'm going to decide to discard it. Again, to review, the reason why I'm discarding this reed is because the playing characteristics that it has exhibited, meaning it is too closed, it is not responding or tapering, it is the E, F, and C sharp are dropping, it is relatively in tune, but the low register is not responding well, and it is closing up in the high register, and it is stuffy. All of these playing characteristics tend to contradict one another and make it so that any remedy that I choose to use will exacerbate another problem. So I feel that this reed has painted itself into a corner and made it so that there is no context in which I can play on it. So one might consider this a moment of failure to have to discard a reed, but as was discussed in a previous video of this series, I would like to consider this a moment of liberation to discard this reed from my life. And I think it's a good exercise to perhaps pick, shall we say, a sociopath in your life and imagine their face on the blade of this reed. You can pick two and imagine one person's face on one blade and another sociopath, annoying person, horrible person, their face on the other blank. So you can get rid of two people at once. And do a little something like this. Just put it over here and just do that to it. I like to rip them off of the reed. And then I like to fold them over like this and shove them right in there. I think that is a very cathartic statement and really liberates me and lets me know that it's the reed that failed, not me and not you. Thank you.